So welcome to the City of West Sacramento's Utility Rate Study webinar. My name's Roberta Raper, and I'm the Finance Director for the city. I've been with the city nearly 6 years, and I was hired shortly after the previous utility rate study was completed in 2017. At that time, rates were set by council for a 5-year period starting July 1st, 2017, with the last approved rate increase being implemented in July 2021. State law prescribes how rates are developed and adopted, how far into the future rates may be set, and the city's last rate adjustment for water, sewer, and refuse, the utilities for which the city provides service, was effective, as I mentioned, July 1st, 2021. There has not been a rate adjustment since. So that means we're a little late getting started on this process. As I mentioned, state law prescribes how rates are set, how they're adopted, and certain public notice and public hearing requirements for setting or adjusting rates. Before we get to the legal notification phase of the process, however, we wanted to engage our ratepayers and provide information on what utility services the city provides, what that entails, including infrastructure requirements, additional ancillary services that are available to help provide transparency into usage and bill amounts, and to help ratepayers manage their water usage, leaks, and overall bill amounts, and information on how rates are studied and what they pay for. So for tonight, we have several subject matter experts from the city's public works, capital projects, finance, and environmental services and sustainability departments, as well as our rates expert, rate modeling expert consultant here tonight, ready to present pertinent information and answer any questions that you might have about the city's utilities in general or the rate study process more specifically. We've developed a webpage dedicated to the rate study process, which I'll provide a link to and more information about as we get further into the presentation. And a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, we will be accepting questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will not be taking verbal questions. We have a limited time here tonight, and so we wanted to be as succinct as possible. We won't be taking verbal questions. So please, if you have questions, you may type them in the Q&A feature anytime. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. And if you have any technical issues, we can address those through the Q&A feature as well. So now for the main event, I'd like to introduce Amber Wallace, our senior civil engineer in the Capital Projects Department, to start off with some really interesting information related to infrastructure projects for the city's utilities. Amber.
Thank you, Roberta. I'm Amber Wallace. I'm with the City of West Sacramento, and I'm a senior civil engineer. Can we change the slide, please? So I'm going to talk about the city's water and sewer systems. And so let's start with the good stuff, the city's water system overview. So the George Christoph Water Treatment Plant, it produces 11 million gallons of fresh water per day. And so you can see that in the background of my slide. There's also 7 storage tanks in the distribution center, 2 clear wells, 8 booster pumps, and 188 miles of water main line, and over 16,000 water meters. Can we change the slide? Thank you. The city water has lots of challenges. And so one of the main challenges in the north area is aging infrastructure. And so I shared a picture of a giant geyser on this page, but usually when a water main breaks, it's not that big. So it would just be a bubbling or a puddle on the ground. But this one happened on Southport with a large water main. There was a truck that actually hit a fire hydrant. So I thought that'd be fun to share. Regulatory compliance updates for the state of California have shaped our challenges with the city water system. We needed to install water meters all over the city of West Sacramento. And now that we've installed them all, we now have to update them so that they're using the most latest and greatest technology and giving you the most accurate data on your water meter bill. Water rights and supplies is a really hot issue button in California. There is not enough water and too many people who want it. And so our staff have to work with regulators and with the surrounding agencies to make sure that the city of West Sacramento has the water supply and rights that we need from now and into the future. Climate change also is causing troubles for our water system because when we have no rain or long periods of drought, there is more water needed for landscaping, and that causes issues as well. So for the city sewer system overview, we have 180 miles of sewer pipelines in the city, 9 pump stations, 5 lift stations, and all the sewage gets sent to Elk Grove to the Regional Sand Wastewater Treatment Plant. Regional Sand bills through our billing system, but they create their own rates. So that's a little bit different than what we're doing. So challenges by the sewer system are aging infrastructure, backups and sinkholes. And Paul, can you, so here's a picture of a pipe that has been corroded. And so a lot of times when a pipe is older, there is a pipe will get old and corrode, and then water and soil will start seeping into our sewer system. And that can cause backups into the sewer backing up, and can it also cause a sinkhole. And so all the fines come in and create a void underneath the ground. And so this one is like a small 1.5 foot void sinkhole we found in the State Streets neighborhood, and Public Works fixed that right away when we found it. But this is the kind of stuff that we're trying to avoid and look for before it happens and before it becomes an issue. Infiltration and inflow reduction is another cause. It's when groundwater or rainwater gets into our sewer system, and it causes more pumping costs, more treatment costs, and particularly for the city of West Sacramento, the pumping cost is astronomical due to the energy rates. And then also it can cause increased infrastructure needs. So particularly in the downstream portion of the sewer, like in the south area, we'll have so much flow going into pump stations that we'll think, do we need another pump station? Or should we fix all the pipes in the sewer service and try to find all these leaks and cracks? Because it can be very small. It doesn't have to be as big as I just showed you. Another way that residents can help with maintaining the sewer and make sure that it's clean and clear, and that we're able to do our jobs as efficiently as possible, is to make sure you keep all fats, oils, and grease outside of your sinks. So those should be scraped and put in a can or in a garbage. Also, there's no wipes in pipes, which means those flushable wipes that we all have seen are not flushable. And I don't know why they're called flushable, but that's a really big problem for us in the sewer industry. So don't flush any kind of wipes or anything rather than toilet paper. So I have a list. I have a lot of pictures of completed infrastructure projects that we've done. And these were identified in the 2015 sewer and water master plans. So here's the first one that was just recently done. It's called Linden Acres Water Main Replacement and Water Meter Retrofits. And in the Linden Acres neighborhood, they were having a lot of problems with water breakage, water line breakage. And so our crews were out there all the time. And so this project that was recently completed has been saving the city staff 20 hours of overtime a month, which is very important to our small staff. And then also, I shared the cost of $7.3 million, and that includes design, construction, and everything in between. So here's another recent project. It's the State Streets Water Main Replacement Project. This is a neighborhood that their infrastructure is at the end of its life. And so for $4 million, we replaced aging water main. And we want to do that prior to doing the upcoming State Streets rehabilitation project for the pavement. We also did the sewer main rehabilitation project, which had at a cost of $4.7 million. We happened to use a rehabilitation method called CIPP, cured in place pipe. And so you can see this cool picture of this felt liner being inserted into the sewer line. And then that felt liner is going to be impregnated with resin and filled up with hot water or hot air and cured in place. It creates a structural pipe within the pipe. And it's a very inexpensive way to fill up all those holes, all the gaps, any kind of root intrusion, any kind of problems we've had with those sewers. And we saw in our latest modeling effort that infiltration in this neighborhood has gone down significantly. So it was such a great story, a success story. So here's a project where we did Coke and Triangle sewer lift station rehabilitation projects. And remember, there's many lift stations and pump stations, both on the sewer and water side. And a lot of them, especially in the north area, are pretty old. So we're going through doing rehabilitation. These two together was about $2.7 million, and we saved 20 hours of overtime per week for our crews. So that's a success. Here's a project that happened at the George Christoph water treatment plant, and it's a raw water intake facility improvement. It was $1.25 million, and this is a high-risk asset that was near the end of its life cycle, and it's such an important asset that we have to make sure that it's always working and never broken down. So this was a very important project. Here's a project that we're just doing an investigation on. This is another very vital part of our distribution center. It's the high service fault investigation at the water treatment plant. Right now, $500,000 for investigation only. And in the future, we're going to have to do some rehabilitation to this. Can you please change the slide? So at the top, I show some upcoming infrastructure projects, and right at the top is the high service vault construction. We're thinking that's going to be about $6.8 million. I don't think that number's finalized yet, but in addition to that, we're going to have several more pump station rehabilitation projects, and they're about $2 million a piece. We're going to continue to update the water meters. And so right now we have allotted 5.2 million, but we're going to continue as water meters break or they get old or new technology will continue to have to replace them. And that's 16,000 of them in the city. It adds up. There's also going to be infrastructure upgrade projects in the Washington district. There's also ones in other parts of the city where just the infrastructure in general is old, and we'll have to upgrade it and replace out the water and sewer lines. And so we have CCTV inspection of the sewer system. That's a way we look at sewer and look for all the cracks and problems in our sewer. And then we determine based on that information, what's the best way to fix it, keeping in mind asset management principles. And in the past, we were more of a reactive maintenance city. And reactive maintenance means you wait until something breaks or, there's a problem and then we fix it. And so now we're trying to move towards more preventative maintenance. And preventative maintenance is good because as you plan for things, they tend to be cheaper. And you can look at it from asset management principles and choose like what's the best reward for the cost that we're spending. And so with a little bit of planning, we don't spend as much in the long run. So in this time where we're changing from a reactive maintenance to a preventative maintenance, we still have to have like emergency funds for both sewer and water. That's there every year for anything that just happens to break that we weren't aware that was going to happen. And then as well as all this investigations type stuff to make sure that in the future we start to know our system even better. And so we can estimate when these breaks are going to happen and actually fix them before they do. We're also doing a water supply backup study to look for different alternative methods of water supply to the city. And right now, we're looking at $2 million for the backup study, but the solutions that we're going to look at will probably be 10 times that amount. We're also redoing the water and sewer master plans, and another project that we're looking at are water tank rehabilitations, and those are 4 million a piece. And so when you all get down to it, like the estimated 5-year capital improvement water budget is around $50 million, and the estimated 5-year capital improvement sewer budget is 20 million. And the reason why they're so different is because the water budget includes the George Christoph water treatment plant, which is a very high risk, very important asset. I mean, that asset is one of, I would say, the most important in our city. So thank you so much. I want to introduce Tracy Kent Stone, Environmental Services and Sustainability Manager.
Thank you, Amber. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'll be providing you with an overview of the city's trash services. Next slide, please. So solid waste services are provided to residents and businesses of West Sacramento through an exclusive contract with Waste Management. So this means Waste Management provides trash, recycling, and organic waste collection and disposal by way of a 3-cart system for residents, and trash and recycling services for businesses. Businesses are also required to have organic waste services and can choose any city-approved hauler to provide that service. Residents have the following services available to them, including household hazardous waste collection for things like batteries, paint, motor oil, pool chemicals, just to name a few. Next slide. So proper sorting at the source is very important so we can keep our waste loads clean. Contamination can render an entire load non-recyclable and or non-compostable, meaning that it could actually get sent to the landfill. So it's important that we recycle right from the beginning. And here are some examples of recycling right. You can see here in the recycling row would be cardboard, paper, aluminum, glass, and plastic. For organics, that would be your yard waste, garden trimmings, food scraps, and food soil paper, which would include like pizza boxes or napkins that you've used. And then in trash, it's everything else. Those are things that are not recyclable, not organic, things like broken glass, polystyrene foam, and pet waste. If you have any questions about how to recycle, you can visit our website at westsacrecycles.org. And in terms of funding, the city collects an administrative fee to fund city solid waste functions, such as our utility billing, contract management, waste reduction programs, which are mandated by the state. And that is an example of that would be SB 1383, and street repairs associated with damage caused by collection trucks. Next slide. So SB 1383, this was signed into law in 2016 with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions caused by organic waste disposals in the landfill. It is a requirement for all residents and businesses with very few exceptions. SB 1383 does mandate jurisdictions provide organic waste collection and recycling service for all residents and businesses. Again, organic waste includes yard waste, food waste, and food soil paper. Jurisdictions are also required to ensure all bins are labeled with SB 1383 compliant labels to identify what goes in each cart. This is part of a comprehensive outreach requirement prescribed by SB 1383. I bet you didn't know Californians send 11.2 billion pounds of food to landfills each year. SB 1383 requires jurisdictions in California to implement an edible food recovery program that will, 1, feed hungry people, and 2, reduce those greenhouse gas emissions by keeping edible food out of the landfill. And lastly, SB 1383 requires cities to purchase and use a specified quantity of recovered organic waste products to meet the law's annual procurement requirement. Next slide. SB 1383 has and will continue to change the landscape for the city's solid waste programs. So for instance, the city is required by law to develop a compliance monitoring and enforcement program effective January 1 of 2024. This program will ensure all generators are compliant with SB 1383 provisions, and if they are not, enforcement action may occur. Additionally, SB 1383 requires all carts and bins to be color compliant by 2036 or sooner, depending on a jurisdiction's current supply of carts and bins. This change will come at a cost. And lastly, the city currently has an SB 1383 Tier 1 edible food program. However, implementation of a Tier 2 program will be required in the very near future. This program will require additional program development and implementation. Now I'd like to turn it over to Rick Simonson from HF&H as our rates consultant.
Thank you, Tracy. Good evening. I'm Rick Simonson, Senior Vice President with HF&H Consultants. We've been assisting jurisdictions throughout California in setting their rates for water, sewer, and refuse services since 1989. HF&H was selected through a competitive process to assist the city in setting rates for the next 5-year period. As mentioned earlier, that is a maximum number of years for which you can set rates at any given time. So I thought I'd start off with, well, what is a cost of service study? It's important to understand that the city's utilities are operated as a self-supporting enterprise fund individually, water, sewer, and refuse. The revenues generated to pay for these expenses can only come from user rates and charges. The city's general fund cannot subsidize these rates, nor can the rates and charges be used to subsidize any general fund program. So these are all self-sufficient utilities. And importantly, with the passage of Proposition 218 by the voters in 1996, it laid out some methodologies for setting rates, and they must be based on the cost of service to provide service to each customer class. Again, as with the general fund and the utilities, no customer class can subsidize another. So there are 4 distinct steps through these cost of service studies. First, we have to identify the costs that need to be recovered. Those operating and maintenance expenses for day-to-day operations, as well as the capital projects that you've heard a lot about tonight. Second, these costs need to be tracked, which are changing, and who bears the burden. We have to look at allocating costs to each customer class, residential versus commercial, and make sure each customer class is paying their fair share. Lastly, or third step, design the rates once we understand how much needs to come from residents and how much needs to come from businesses to ensure that each customer and customer class is paying for their proportionate share of costs. Nothing more, nothing less. And lastly, documenting these impacts to the customers. What are the expected increases over the next 5-year period of the average customer? Next slide. I'll start off with just a brief overview of what we've done with the city over the last 6 months in the rate studies and where we are with refuse. First, we have to look at the revenue requirement. How much revenue needs to be generated to cover costs? So with this graph, with the bars are nearly $14 million in 23-24 is necessary to cover the cost, both the waste management contract, which is indicated in blue, and the red, the city's expenses that have not already been covered with other fees for the billing, contract management, and other items that have been discussed earlier today. Also on this graph, you'll see the revenue at current rates depicted with the black solid line. Those revenues are not covering current nor projected expenses, as you can see from the graph. Historically, since we have not had an increase since July of 2021, reserves have been covering any revenue shortfalls. A little more specifics about the key issues as we've been moving through the process that will be affecting rates. We do know some sort of increase will be necessary over the next 5 years. Once again, and you'll see this repeated, We have not had an increase in refuse rates since July 1, 2021. Though, as we all know, costs have been increasing. Consumer price index has been higher than pre-COVID days. So the current rates, again, do not cover the current or projected expenses. Waste management costs have increased 4% per year since July 1, 2021, and are projected to increase similarly over the next 5-year period. Another key factor are the disposal fees with the contract the city has with Yolo County Landfill. This past February, they increased 8.4%. So to tip the solid waste that is collected at the landfill, those costs have increased 8.4% just in the last year. Give a brief overview of the current refuse rates. With the residential cart service, these are the monthly rates depending on the size of your solid waste container. So you are provided 3 containers: refuse, recycling, and organics, but the rates are set based on the size of your refuse container. So if you're looking to reduce costs, you can downsize to the smaller containers and place more of your materials in the recycling and organics containers. Next slide. We're often asked, how do we compare to our neighbors? So we put together a few slides here and looking at the different sizes that are offered to the residential customers. On the left-hand side, we took a survey of 96-gallon containers on a monthly basis in some neighboring jurisdictions. So you see West Sacramento, out of the 8 that have been surveyed here, are the 3rd lowest. And they do range considerably from $26 a month in Lincoln up to $58.80 up in Davis. This represents about 14% of the single family customers right now. On the right-hand side, the smallest container offered by West Sacramento, which, as shown here, Roseville, Lincoln, and Folsom don't offer the smaller containers. West Sacramento is the lowest rate amongst the other neighboring jurisdictions shown here. And this again represents about 12% of single family customers. The vast majority of customers, next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. The 64-gallon container is the most common single family container size. But this represents 68% of the customer base. Again, West Sacramento is on the lower end of those communities surveyed at $29.14 per month, and Davis at the highest of $49.28 per month. Next slide. Next slide, please. So with that overview of refuse and where we are in the process and your current rates, let's look at sewer rates. The process is similar for each utility. So again, we've shown here the expenses that need to be covered through sewer revenues. The basic day-to-day operations and maintenance costs are depicted in the blue, and capital expenses are shown in the orange. The dark orange represents the debt service that the city is currently paying for past projects that were debt funded. And the light orange are for those future projects that you've heard so much about. You can see these are increasing and do change over time. Again, the total current revenue at current rates is not sufficient to cover these expenses. And just so you know, the total current revenue line does depict growth in the city. We know that does occur, and those revenues can be used to offset costs as well. So that's why you don't see a flat line with the current revenues at current rates. Next slide. Some key issues that are affecting the sewer rates as we've been working with the city on their financial plan over the next 5-year period. Again, the rates have not increased since July 1, 2021. And we know there's additional funding that will be needed for these major rehabilitation projects you've heard about tonight throughout the city. Next slide. A brief summary of the current rates. Residents, single family, are billed on a monthly basis a flat rate of $10.88. Multifamily per dwelling unit is $8.16. And the reason there's a differential there is through water use data. It's known that multifamily customers on a per dwelling unit basis sewer less water than the typical single family resident. And then commercial customers have two components to their rates, a fixed component and a variable charge based on actual water use that's estimated to be discharged into the sewer system. And I'll note these rates do not include the regional sand costs that the city does bill for, but again, the rates are set by regional sand. Next slide. So what are these rates currently for the city, including the regional sand costs for West Sacramento for the typical single family customer is $47.88 per month. Again, this does include the regional sand charge that is billed by the city but remitted to regional sand. And the reason we've done that are the neighboring jurisdictions that we're comparing to. We wanted to make sure it was an apples to apples comparison that include both collection costs that the city provides to the residents, as well as a treatment of the sewer that regional sand provides to the residents. So this is an apples to apples comparison of collection and treatment of sewer amongst neighboring agencies. And again, we see West Sacramento is currently on the lowest end of the graph. Next slide. Looking at water rates. We do a similar analysis and look over the next 5-year period. Those costs again here are depicted with the operations and maintenance costs in the blue and capital related expenses for past capital being debt financed in the dark orange and future projects in the light orange. Total current revenue at current rates, if we did nothing, you see there in the black line. So as we've gone through this process, we know some sort of rate increase will be necessary. How those will translate to new rates, we're still working with the city. Next slide. Again, rates have not increased also for the water utility since July 1, 2021. And as shown on the previous slide, current rates do not cover current or projected expenses. Many upgrades are happening throughout the city as previously discussed, one of which is water meter upgrades. This will allow all customers to track their water use and identify leaks quickly. Also, the city is contemplating tiered water rates. Currently, there's a uniform rate per unit of water used. Next slide. And that's depicted here. The water bills are made up of two components. There's a fixed charge for all customers plus a consumption charge based on the metered water use. On the left-hand side, you see the monthly rates based on the meter that is providing service to that property. Of note, most single-family residences have a 3/4 inch meter and are currently charged $24.61 per month. In addition, based on how much water is used at each individual customer location, there's an additional charge of $2.43 per 100 cubic foot of metered water use during that billing period. 100 cubic feet of water is equal to 748 gallons, to give you some idea of how much water that is. Next slide. Again, where do you currently compare to your neighboring agencies? About right in the middle currently with your current water rates. Folsom on the low end of $36.70 and as high as $101.96 in Woodland. And I'll point out this because everybody uses water differently during the year, your bills do change. This comparison is looking at the average water use, which is 1,100 cubic feet per month. And that's an average about 274 gallons per day. Next slide. With that, I'll introduce Ryan Burnett, the city's water conservation coordinator, will give you some tips and tricks on helpful ways of saving water to reduce those water bills.
All right, thanks, Rick. So good evening. As Rick said, my name is Ryan. I'm in charge of water conservation for the city. So while we're still in the preliminary stages of this rate study, it's always good to know how to save water on your water bill now and in the future. So what I'd like to focus on tonight is a little bit of myth busting. I'd like to show what does and what does not contribute to higher than average water bills. I'll also provide some resources available to you from the city that can help you avoid these higher water bills now and in the future. So I'd like to start with what does not cause high water use. Normal indoor activities like taking showers, using the dishwasher, using the washing machine do not contribute to higher water bills. These activities range between 500 and 1,000 gallons per month, mostly on the lower end of that scale. So total indoor water use tends to be around 5,000 to 8,000 gallons per month. So with that number in mind, let's talk about high water use. In the summer, average monthly water use climbs all the way up from that 5,000 to 8,000 gallons to 20,000 gallons and even 30,000 gallons of water in peak summer months. And I'm sure we can all guess what the cause is for that five-fold increase. It's the sprinklers. In fact, in my time reaching out to high water users throughout the city, sprinkler schedules are by far the main source of high water bills. When they are scheduled to excess, sprinkler schedules can even consume over 70,000 gallons of water per month. So a good rule of thumb is to set your sprinkler schedule following the city's permanent watering schedule. That's a permanent 3-day-a-week schedule based on your address, which you can find on our website, which is wsac.city/water, and it'll be on the next slide. It may sound restrictive to water only 3 days a week, but in my experience, I've seen that plenty of landscapes can stay green and save water. And with sprinklers specifically, a good rule of thumb for them is not to water more than 15 minutes at a time. If you go further than that, it just creates runoff, which is a waste of your money and city resources. So the next biggest source of high water use is leaking toilets. This one surprises a lot of people. So while a normally running toilet uses around 500 gallons per month, one with a large leak can consume 65,000 gallons of water. So how does this happen? Well, there's a device in the back of the toilet called a fill valve, and its job is to fill the back of the toilet and then stop. If the device malfunctions, it will continue to fill and fill, but it won't spill everywhere because in the back of the toilet is something called an overflow tube. So the water is filling too high, and then it's going into the overflow tube. And a lot of people just think that's the sound that a toilet makes, but it can result in 65,000 gallons of water per month. So if you ever hear your toilet making strange sounds when you're not using it, definitely check it out. So the third highest source of water use around the house is from leaks in your supply line. These leaks can add up to 50,000 gallons of water or more. And unlike the other two, these are the hardest to find because they're underground. And there's a misconception that these large leaks will just bubble up out of nowhere, but that is definitely not the case. I've gone to plenty of homes where they had very high water usage and there was no evidence that that was happening, except on the belt. Next slide, please. So the good news is that the city offers a free water portal. This water portal is an online site you can use to check on your water use and sign up for leak alerts. So if you do have a leak, you'll be notified right away. So let me end with a few resources available to you as a resident to help you keep your water bill low. The first is our smart controller rebate. This rebate offers up to $150 to purchase and install a sprinkler timer that will do the scheduling for you. This will help keep your landscape green without a huge water bill in summer months. Many timers cost around $150, So the whole process can be free or nearly free for the homeowner. The city recently launched a new program called Lawn Be Gone. We are offering up to $300 towards the purchase of compost and mulch to cover and kill your lawn. This program has a lot of steps to it, but the basics are that you would apply to the program, take a picture of your current lawn, and then receive notification from the city to cover the lawn with cardboard or weed barrier. Once you're done, you reach back out to us, and then we contact our vendor who sets up a delivery of compost and mulch right to your door. So then you put the compost on the barrier and the mulch on top. That will kill the grass. The third resource available to you is the water portal, which I mentioned before. So this resource can give you a lot of peace of mind as a homeowner, if you're on vacation or if you're away from the house for a while, or just, in the case I talked about before, if you have a supply leak and you can't see evidence of it, you'll get notified right away. Finally, we offer a free Waterwise house call. So simply give us a call at 916-617-4590. I'll come out to your house, I'll check for a leak, I'll review your sprinkler schedule with you, and I'll also turn on each of your sprinkler zones. So if we have any broken sprinklers, we can see them right away. Next slide, please. So I wanted to end with an example of what I've been talking about, because sometimes it's a little hard to believe. So this is an example of very high water use. So this was from last month. So it's a little bit hard to see the numbers, but this is a residential property and their water use. And the average water use in the wintertime is around 5,000 gallons. In the summertime, it gets up to around 20,000 gallons, but you can see those two big spikes. They're around 200,000 gallons of water. And those were from an underground leak. So every month I send out letters to the highest water users. They were on my list. I went out to the property. They were like, this has to be some kind of mistake. There's no way I'm using 200,000 gallons of water. I opened up the water meter box and it was just clicking like crazy. And we used some of the shutoffs and we were able to determine that the leak was between the water meter and the house shutoff. And, they were definitely surprised and they were thankful I came out and they got it fixed right away. So with that, thank you for listening. I'm going to hand it over to Roberta for next steps.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. That was great information. So looks like our slides might be a little bit out of order. I'm going to jump here and talk about our website. We have taught, I mentioned earlier in the presentation, are we going to, okay, that we created a web page specific for the rate study process and so this web page, this gives you a little bit of a idea what it looks like. It has a Rates 101 video that dives a little deeper into the rate study process. Utility Rates 101, they provide information a little bit about how utility rates are developed, how they can be used. It gives you a little bit different information that was provided today. There's other information and notifications on the website, and it will be updated constantly throughout the process. So it gives you a little bit of overview on the rate study. It also gives you a calendar of dates for future outreach dates. And I'll mention some additional things that we'll be adding through the process. So the next steps, let's see, I'll go back up to my notes there. So as you can see on this slide, this is a picture of the postcard that you probably got in the mail if you are joining us here tonight. The next steps in the process include an open house next week on Thursday, October 9th or 19th, excuse me, at Club West in the north side of town. And the following week, Wednesday, October 25th at the Recreation Center on the south side of town. We will have subject matter experts available at those events as well to provide additional information and answer any questions you might have. There won't be a formal presentation like there is today. These events will be a little bit more informal, but we'll have several staff and booths, posted information, the Rates 101 video playing, and additional resources related to the city's utility services and the rate study process available at the events. They're really geared for you to come out and ask your questions and just talk one-on-one with the people who deal with this every day, and do a deep dive and answer those burning questions for you. So no questions too big or too small. Please bring your family and friends, your neighbors, and your burning questions to the events. As mentioned earlier, over the next couple of months, we are going to work to update the rate study, the model that Rick talked about, and develop the proposed rates. At this point, we plan to have a workshop with the Environmental and Utilities Commission in December, followed by a workshop with the City Council in January. Assuming we receive good direction from council at that meeting in January, we would then post a Proposition 218 notice. That's that legally required notification to ratepayers that I talked about earlier, of the proposed rate adjustment, and notifying ratepayers of the date of the public hearing, what the rates are that are proposed, and when they would go into effect. We are tentatively counting on a public hearing in March 2024 at this time. So in February, after the required notice is mailed to all ratepayers and before the public hearing, we plan to hold another community meeting to discuss the proposed rates with ratepayers. And that's probably the event you'll really want to attend, to understand what the proposed rates are going to be, what they will cover, how we plan to mitigate significant increases if there are any. It's also an opportunity for you to provide feedback that's going to help us dial in any issues that need to be addressed before rates are approved or adopted. So again, that event will be held before any rate changes are considered for adoption by the City Council. So please note on your calendars to check our website, and it'll be scheduled sometime in February. So as soon as we know the date, we'll update the dedicated webpage that I was talking about. And then please keep an eye on your utility bills as well. We may provide notification through a bill stuffer or through a note directly on your bill versus sending out separate postcards, just because the cost is, of course, a lot different to send dedicated mailings. And so if you're keeping an eye on our website, you'll get it. We'll also be posting this information on the city's social media and other avenues. But the best thing to do is to visit the dedicated webpage that we've developed specifically for this purpose, because all information that we come up with is gonna go out there. I mentioned the webpage has the Rates 101 video. It'll have this video as soon as tomorrow. So if you want to come back, or any of your neighbors missed the webinar, they can come and watch it. They'll be able to see the answers to all the questions and all of the information that was provided today. And the page will be updated, as I mentioned, constantly throughout the rate study process. And it's where you'll find all of the information, including somewhere I have this, but we'll have a bill calculator. I mean, as we get closer and as we continue down this process, we'll have a lot of tools out there for you too, to be able to see how you can save on your water and sewer usage, to see how you can calculate and see what your bill might be. If you get a bill this month, hey, calculate it over here what it might be with your new rates. So once we have more information on what those proposed rates are, there will be a lot more tools available on our website. So with that, let's see. Oh, additionally, I think I mentioned future outreach dates, including the workshops and public hearing with council, and a dispute form for the rates will be out there as well. So as you can see, there are several months still in this process. We've got a little ways to go. There are many opportunities for you to get involved and engaged. And we really hope that you will invite your friends and neighbors to our open house events next week, and to the event in February as well. So that ends the scheduled portion of the webinar. I now want to open it up for Q&A. As I mentioned, we'll be doing it through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens. And we've got a few questions already. So I'm going to pull those up, and then we'll get our subject matter experts on here to answer your questions for us. So first one, it looks like there were a couple that came in, Tracy, when you were talking about the refuse. First one here is, can you find a way to recycle styrofoam? Currently, it's put in the trash.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is put in the trash currently. And unfortunately, at this point, we don't have styrofoam as part of our recycle waste stream with Waste Management, our hauler. It is quite expensive to recycle styrofoam, and we would also need to make sure that Waste Management has a way of recycling it. There's a specific method for which it would be recycled, and so that would be something that we could look at in future contract negotiations. And if that is something that we can work with Waste Management on, that would likely also increase rates slightly. As I said, it is pretty expensive to recycle it.
All right, thanks, Tracy. The next one is for you as well. It says the cart or bin rates do not show a strong incentive to conserve. So, and I don't know if this is you or if it's Rick, can we give more focus to conserving?
Yeah, Rick, I can take a quick stab at that. And if you have anything to add, please jump in for sure. So in terms of putting more of a focus on conserving. The great news is that we have 3 different size trash containers, the 96 gallon, the 64 gallon, and the 35 gallon. And so that is a way that folks can put an emphasis on conserving, is by right sizing your trash service. And so if you're diverting more of your recyclables and you're diverting more of your organics out of your trash and into the proper waste streams, you can right size your trash container, which would also reduce your rates and will also put an emphasis on conserving and recycling more.
All right, thank you. This next one looks like it's related to sewer. It says, do you provide input to Regional SAN about controlling their rates? And I'll just say, no, we don't. I mean, they do sewer treatment. We do the sewer collection. So we do very, very different things. They don't reach out to us to provide input on controlling their rates, just as we don't necessarily reach out to them to talk about our water or our refuse rates. They are legally required to provide the same notices that we are through the Prop 218 process. So we do get a notice, as you do as well, anytime they are proposing to raise their rates. And the only way that we could try and influence their rates is by disputing them, which is the process that you have open to you as well. The unfortunate thing about that is in order for rates that are proposed to be struck down, it takes a pretty high margin. It's like over half of the ratepayers or account owners dispute. And so even if we were to do that, it unfortunately wouldn't have any impact on Regional SAN. But it should be good for you to know they have to follow the same prescribed process. So they look at what their costs are. They look at what needs to be done to their system and their infrastructure needs over whatever the time is that they're looking at setting rates. And even though, as Rick mentioned, these are enterprise funds, they're self-supporting, they act like businesses, but there is no profit. So we cannot charge more than our cost of doing business. Same with Regional SAN. So, and I will mention, if we go back, well, we don't need to go back to the slide, but on the slide where Rick showed the comparison of the city of West Sacramento's rate along with Regional SAN's rate for sewer service compared to everyone else, we were the lowest. So I think even it sounds like perhaps there is some conservation or some rate lowering going on, or we're doing pretty good at controlling costs compared to our surrounding agencies, because with collection and treatment services for sewer, it looks like you're actually receiving the lowest rates around, which is a positive. So thank you. Let's see. We've got another question here. With the water rates, have you considered a progressive rate on usage, an inclining block rate structure to strongly provide an incentive to conserve water? It looks like the current structure has a single block rate. So yes, this is actually something that Rick mentioned. We are considering tiered rates, which means that the lower amount of water you use, you would pay less per CCF or per unit of water. And if you use a lot more water, that higher usage is going to be charged a higher rate. That is absolutely something that we are considering this time around. I don't know what that's going to look like. And I mentioned earlier some mitigation measures that we'd look at. Something like that could end up having a pretty big impact on really high water users. And so we'd want to look at how we could sort of mitigate or roll in some of those changes. But absolutely, we are looking at that. That is an option that would help us conserve water and would hopefully reduce the impact of rate changes on the lowest water users. So yes. As a reminder, if you have any questions, we'll be on here for another 7 minutes or so. So please go ahead and use the Q&A feature. So let's see, next rate or next question. I'm sorry, Margie, are you on? Are there discounts for low income or seniors on a fixed income?
Yes, there is. There are rates that we have available that you just call our office, or the application is also available online. The low income rates use the same guidelines as the PG&E, so very similar. And it'll save you $3 on the water and $2 on the refuse.
Excellent. And I was even thinking, so we do have that program now. If anyone's wondering whether that program will continue or change through this process, that's a good question. The program will continue for sure. Whether or not it will change, we're looking at that as part of the rate study process as well. to make sure that we're providing appropriate discounts for our most fiscally challenged residents. So let's see. How can I access the water usage portal? So there was a mention of being able to access a portal to see your usage and get notifications if you use high water. Is that something, Margie or Ryan, you can speak to?
Yeah, so if you go to wsac.city/water, that'll take you to the main water conservation page. And on that page is a link to the water portal. So that'll take you to the water portal page. And I tried to detail it pretty well. You know, it's basic signing up for something. You're going to put in an email. You do need to make sure you have one of your utility bills with you, because there's going to be a couple codes that you need to use to make sure it's you. But then also on that water portal page, if you scroll down, you'll see screenshots of what the water portal looks like, as well as tips and instructions for signing up for the leak alerts, which I'd mentioned before.
Thank you. I think I see a question about whether that's available for all users or only those with an updated meter. And I will mention some of you might go out and try to sign into that portal or register for that portal and make it an error. That is one reason most of our residents can see usage information on the portal. But one of our projects, a very costly project, is replacing meters and the little contraptions and compartments and pieces that go with the meters that allow them, one, to communicate with the tower to be read automatically, two, to be able to be read with the census on the census portal, so you can have access. And we have different meters that measure in different amounts. So you're billed on in one way, you're billed on 100 cubic feet. But some people can see cubic feet in usage, some people can see 100 cubic feet. And so a lot of that is very inconsistent and really troublesome, I think, and frustrating for residents. And so that's the reason we have one of the projects that we have on the list to replace all of those pieces and parts so that everybody can see the same data, has access to that portal, and has transparency into their bill. So it looks like, let's see, next question. How do we provide input on the major part of the sewer rates, the regional sand portion of the bill? That information or input would go directly to regional sand. They are a completely separate agency from the city. They provide their services to several agencies within the region. We just happen to be one of them. And they set their rates at a different time. I'm not exactly sure what that is. If it's something you'd like to follow up on, I can see if I can get some more information and reach out to me. I'm the finance director. So if you go to the finance page on the website, you can find my contact information. If you'd like to reach out to me, I would be happy to follow up and get more information on when they set their rates and who you can contact there to have more input into their rate setting process. All right. So let's see, we've got 2 more minutes. So let me grab another question here. So I think Ryan told us how you can get a WaterWise house call and how you can determine if you have an underground leak. Margie, if there is an underground leak discovered, does the city have a program to help with the cost of covering the water used by that leak?
We do. We have what we call the water leak adjustment form that is available online. You would fill that out with any details about how the leak was repaired, any photos that dates the leak occurred, and you can simply just email that to our office and we will review. Once we determine the leak, that it is a water leak and it's been repaired, you are eligible to have an averaged water consumption credit given towards your account and help pay that down. The does not exceed $500. The credit will not go higher than that, though.
All right, thank you, Margie. Let's see, we've still got some more time here, and I've got a couple of additional questions. So the first one, let's see, does the city know what rates will be proposed after the rate study is complete? And I think we mentioned during the process, we don't yet know that, but we should know soon. And as soon as we do, we'll be getting information out to ratepayers as to what we're proposing to charge, how they can get involved and dispute or learn more, whatever the case may be. And so I would urge you to keep an eye on the website. I will tell you, however, that when the rate studies are complete, we are proposing to go to council in March for the public hearing to have council adopt the rates. The new rates, once they're adopted, would not go into effect until July 1st. So we're looking at a rate adjustment effective July 1st, 2024. And then another question, how could we dispute the rate increase? If there is an increase proposed, or if you have any issues with the rates that are proposed, there will be a dispute form on that website as well, along with instructions on how to submit that. You can also contact the counselor, come to the public hearing. Let's see, next question. I'm going to do one more, even though it says 8 o'clock, because I've got one more question here. So why don't developers pay for the cost of infrastructure if they are building homes that place demand on the utility system? They do. So that's one of the things that we look at too as part of this study. So new development is supposed to pay its own way. We determine through the master plan, the water and sewer master plan processes, what the projects are over the next few years that need to be put in to serve new development, as well as to keep the system going for the existing users. Through that process, we also do a nexus study to connect the portion of the cost of those things that need to be done to new development, so we can determine how much to charge developers. Developers do provide money, and when we look at our rates, we look at what the amount it costs us in operations, in debt service, in capital projects, in infrastructure repair and maintenance, and new construction. We look at what that need is, and we look at what are our revenues that we get currently from our ratepayers. What are the revenues that we get from developers? What are any other revenues that we get that go towards that? And then we determine if there's a difference there, the amount that needs to go to rates. So absolutely, it's not 100% on the back of ratepayers. Development pays its own way. I know we're after 8 o'clock. It is 8:01. I don't see any additional questions. So we're going to go ahead and close it out tonight. As I mentioned, this is recorded. By tomorrow. You should be able to find it on the website. If you're still on, you can scan that QR code right there, or visit wsac.city/utility-rates. And that's where you can find all of the information on upcoming events and any other information that we're going to put out on this rate study. So thank you so much for attending tonight. I'll remind you again, please come join us next week at our in-person open house, and we hope we answered your questions. If you do have any additional questions, come to one of our events, and we're more than happy to talk with you a little bit more. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night.